Bam. We're live. We're waiting on John's camera.
Bang, bang, boogie.
We are here. It's the bye week for the Dallas Cowboys. We are Cowboys are 3-3. But it sure as heck feels a lot worse than that, doesn't it, John?
No. Feels like the sky is falling.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a rough time to be a Cowboys fan right now. Even though, like, let's rewind back just quickly. I'm on Pro Football Reference over here on the efforting screen here. And let's think back to it's crazy how similar the situation is. Coming out of week 6 last year, the Cowboys were 4-2. Now, granted, they had played 3 last year, really bad football teams. They played the Jets immediately after the Aaron Rodgers injury last year. So they were going to win that game almost no matter what. They had beat the Giants 40-0 that were in a bad team. They played the bad Patriots, beat them really bad. And then they lost to the 49ers. Let's see if this score sounds anything similar. 42-10. Now, granted, that was a road game, but they, like I said, 42-10 was the score against the 49ers in week 5 last year. Now, they did come back and beat the Chargers 20-17, but that was a bad Chargers team too. And they were 4-2 going into the bye, and the sky was falling. And this team was going to lose to the Rams coming out of the bye, and then they had the Eagles, and the Eagles were playing really well, and the Cowboys weren't going to make the playoffs. And now if we fast forward to 2024, the Cowboys just lost 47-9 at home against a really good team in the NFC, in another division, a team that's favored to win their division. And they're 3-3 going into the bye. The offense feels kind of stale. It feels like there's a lot left to be desired on defense. And they're going into the bye week, and everybody's wondering, is it time to fire Mike McCarthy? Is it time to move on? We're lucky that the quarterback signed his contract already, or we'd be hearing do the Cowboys need to consider letting Dak Prescott walk in the offseason questions. It feels very similar to 2023. Does it feel that way to you?
Yeah, certainly, definitely getting a little bit of Groundhog's Day with this Cowboys team, especially, just throughout Mike McCarthy's tenure being, really poor starting the season, especially offensively, the thing that he has the biggest hand in. This is, I think, 3 straight years that the offense has been really, really static, really unimaginative coming out of the season, which I think is a big, big, big problem with McCarthy as a head coach. The fact that, after having months and months the scheme to plan, to curtail the scheme to the players, to the personnel, do your film reviews of the rest of the teams around the league to see what's working, what's not, what's cutting edge, all these different things. And for like the 3rd straight season, it's just doesn't really cut it. And we'll see, in the previous years coming out of the bye, the offense definitely made big changes. You saw them adding in more condensed formations, more bunch, more stacks, more motion at the snap, all of those type of things. More crossing routes. I know one big thing that you always mention is you send a guy vertically down the field, down the middle, and then you cross around under them, and that makes it a lot easier. Those type of things were incorporated much more post-bye than pre-bye throughout McCarthy's tenure. And I don't know about you. I think one of the only hopes that we have really moving forward is the fact that that's going to happen again for the 3rd straight year. If it does, I think that's the best, given that the Cowboys have diminished personnel compared to or diminished talent levels compared to the last couple seasons. the changes in the offense are really the only big changes I think the Cowboys can really make at this moment. They can make a tangible, positive result for the team as a whole. So, it's just going to be, just kind of crossing our fingers right now, hoping, because if they come out of the bye and the offense still looks the same, it still looks static, it still looks unimaginative, the motions aren't with urgency, they're not at the snap, they're more shifts, they're more identifying man zone tendencies, those type of things. The run game's not getting working. And I'm not sure. I think Dak will have better games, and he'll have games where he'll, light up the scoreboard and stuff like that. But I don't think it's gonna. Without that change, I don't think this team can really do much. They're kind of going upwards against current.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, one of the questions that we got on Twitter from Gabe, and let me pull up his at Rhyme for a Dime. That's a fun handle. His question was simple: is it over? And I think there's a lot of directions that you can kind of go with that. And is the season over? If you wonder, okay, is the season over from a can this team win the Super Bowl standpoint? I think the season was probably over for that before it really got started, if we're going to be honest. They were going to be a good team. They were going to probably win a bunch of games. They've lost a game or two early in the season that you would have thought coming in that they would have won. But is it over from hey, this team can never accomplish anything or won't make the playoffs or anything like that? I don't think that's the case, because I think that you presented the perfect case for it. Is that I think the thing that makes it harder this year to root for this team than it was last year coming out of the bye week was, at least last year going into the bye, you had games they beat the Giants 40-0 because the defense was just dominant. Turnover after turnover, takeover after takeover. They had 7 takeaways in the first 3 weeks or the first 2 weeks last year. And yeah, they lost to the Cardinals. They shouldn't have lost that one, but it was close and all that kind of stuff. Then they turn around and beat New England 38-3. There was a lot of dominant defensive performances in the first half of that season of last year before the bye that gave you hope that hey, the defense is fine. The defense is really good. If the offense can just be good too, if the offense can pick it up, this can be a really good team. And now we're sitting here in 2024 and the defense has been atrocious. Mm-hmm. Even when they were relatively healthy, they were not very good early in the season for the most part. New defensive coordinator, all that kind of stuff, but bad, period.
Yeah.
And the offense has been the same thing that the offense was earlier in the season, and you detailed it very well. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where it's almost like, hey, even if they change the offense and it gets fixed, it won't really matter because the defense isn't good. Mm-hmm. So they're still going to be limited by they can't stop anybody from running the ball. They can't do this. They can't do that. Anytime they run into a good offense, they're going to be in trouble. And they're going to run into the Eagles who want to run the ball a ton. They're going to run into the Commanders who want to run the ball a ton. They're going to run into all these teams that want to run the ball, and they're not going to be able to stop them. But I do think you're going to get players back. Micah Parsons is coming back. DeMarcus Lawrence will be back.
Oh, yeah. Anybody trying to act like Micah Parsons not rushing the passer, not a big deal, huh?
Yeah. Seems like. And the thing that people are like, this team doesn't have any depth on the defensive line. That's because before defensive end 1 and 2 went out, defensive end 3 and 4 were both on injured reserve. And then defensive end 1 and 2. So your best defensive end right now was your third interior defensive lineman coming into the season. No, you don't have depth because the depth has already been used. Nobody has 14 defensive linemen where you can have 4 guys get hurt and still have an 8-man rotation that's still pretty good. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
There's not enough draft picks. The team doesn't spend money. There's not enough good players, to be honest with you, for a team to have that many. If you have 8 quality defensive linemen that you can run out there and feel good about getting pressure and winning one-on-ones, you are an insanely deep defensive line. Mm-hmm. And now they're down 4 guys, and people are mad that they don't have 7 or 8 guys that can get in there and get after it. Of course they don't. Like, especially when, the results from the first round pick that they invested on the defensive line, a year ago have been up and down, maybe at the friendliest. And so, of course, the defense has been pretty bad this year. There's a lot going on the defensive side of the ball, and they don't have their best. They don't have their best players on defense for the most part. They were missing 5 guys that were going to play massive snaps on their front 7 this year when they played against the Lions. Of course, the Lions are going to run right over them. Oso Odigizua and Mozzie Smith can only do so much, especially when Mozzie's not playing super well. And you've got defensive end 7, 8, and 9 out there running around every day. So is it over? I think if the only thing you care about is, hey, when they get to January, are they going to win a bunch of games and have a chance to win the Super Bowl? I think that was over before the season even started. I think. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would totally agree.
I don't think this team was a legitimate. This was not one of those teams you put in the top 4 or 5 teams of the league going in with a chance to win the Super Bowl. I think they started the year a tier down from that. And then all of the injuries and all that kind of stuff and has pulled them down probably a tier lower than that, where it's now they're like fighting for their playoff lives. They're in the playoff hunt by the fact that they're 500 right now. Because this is one of the things that I think about all the time. As long as you don't have a multiple game losing streak, as in more than 2 games, as long as you play back and forth and you have a quarterback like Dak that can get crazy hot for a 3 or 4 game stretch and make you unbeatable, you've got a chance to win 10 or 11 games, because all you have to do is go on 1 3-game winning streak and then play 500 ball for the rest of the year and you're 10-7. 10-7 is not – it's a hard record to get to because it's hard to win games in the league. It's hard to go on a 3-game winning streak. But this team has shown year after year after year after year they're capable on going on one of those 3, 4, 5-game win streaks. Yeah.
Totally agree. And another point that I kind of wanted to press on with the especially the offense's inability to produce early in the season is, should we really be surprised given that the coaching staff that McCarthy has really put together for this final year? If you think about it, the QB coach, first time ever QB coach, Scott Tolzien, heard really good things about him, but first time head coach or first time quarterbacks coach. Running backs coach, Jeff Blasco, never coached a position in his life before last year.
And he's the run game coordinator.
Yeah, he's an offensive line guy. He's been an assistant offensive line coach basically his entire NFL and college tenure. Robert Prince, receivers coach. He came in with actually with good accolades coming in. He has a history of actually doing well with receivers. But as we've seen, we saw the big thing come out with Troy Aikman today talking about how, and you repeatedly displayed that when we were going over the film on Tuesday, lazy route running by the receivers. That's something that's directly put on the receivers coach for not, for some reason, they're not running their routes as hard as they potentially can. They're not running the right routes, right spacing, all these little details. They're not detail oriented. So all of those things, they kind of go back on the receivers coach. Now, tight end coach, Lunda Wells, I really like Lunda Wells. I think he's honestly the best position coach that they have on the offensive side of the ball. I think he's proven for the improvement we've seen from guys like Ferguson, Schultz at the end of his tenure with the Cowboys. I think he's done a really good job, and I think he's someone that you really want to keep on. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys do get a new head coach next year. Lunda Wells is someone who was kind of, the Joneses told that we should keep this guy coaching the tight ends because I think he does a really good job. Yep. And then Mike Solari, he's been doing it for a long time, but since his tenure with Jim Harbaugh and the 49ers, has he ever gotten an offensive line to perform better than their talent? No. See, you can't say that when he was with the Seahawks. You can't say that when he was with any of the other teams. None of them performed above their talent level capabilities. And we've kind of I've talked repeatedly about the issues that I have with Solari, with the techniques that he's using, with the way that he implemented the rookie offensive lineman into the offseason. And then we are so surprised that the run game kind of looks dysfunctional and it doesn't look like there's much continuity. I think all of those issues are things that were precipitated by not inserting the rookies immediately in after the draft when everybody knew they were going to start. Yeah. We talked about it constantly, and it's not like that we were on an island. Everybody knew. Everybody was talking about how they knew Guyton was going to be the left tackle. And BB, maybe he wasn't definitively going to be the starting center, but everybody thought that was a good there was a better than not chance that he was going to become the starting center.
Yeah.
And I just think when you look at all of those, you look at Brian Schottenheimer. Has he ever gotten an offense to perform better than its talent levels, than its capabilities? I don't think he has.
I think there's a case to be made that there was a year or two in Seattle where, other than Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch, there wasn't a whole lot going on that offense, and they were pretty good on offense. That was a defensive-led team, all that kind of stuff, but that wasn't a loaded offensive skill position group that they did okay. But I think your point is valid in that they added talent to offense and got worse, and that's why and he wound up getting fired. So I think your point is valid for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, when you add all of those things together, you have a offense that's been riddled with injury, in addition to a coaching staff that's really, not super duper impressive resume wise, especially recent resume wise. I don't know. It worries me. It worries me that the team is not getting the coaching that they need. They're not. We always talk from a schematic perspective, but also from a teaching, from a development perspective. I'm not sure they're getting it done in either facet. We definitely know they're not getting it done from the scheme facet. The development facet is a little bit more difficult for us on the outside to really look into and see, because it's kind of shown over years. But not very promising returns at all from this coaching staff, outside of, I think, maybe Lunda Wells. I think is the only guy who's really coached above and beyond on the offensive side of the ball thus far.
Yeah, I think that there's, we've used the word details a lot. They talked about, being better at the basics. These things are not new conversations to be had, which is kind of part of the problem, right? We've had this conversation. We had it, I remember having it in 2020 when they talked about how they tried to put too much in on defense too early in 2020 in the COVID year. And because of that, they couldn't execute, and they, all this other, they didn't do a good job of handling the virtual OTAs, and they didn't do it, all this other stuff. So I think it really does come down, like you said, it comes down to, for a lot of it, is the coaching, especially on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive side of the ball, I talked about this on Tuesday. I can't really put too much on the defense right now, because they don't have anybody play. Like, when you lose this many guys on defense, it to me becomes a throw crap at the wall and see if anything sticks kind of situation. And I'm not going to judge Mike Zimmer on what he's throwing at the wall to try to see if it sticks. Now, Fisher Kid has a good question. Zim mentioned that he may have panicked too early. I don't remember hearing this quote. What was that in reference to? More blitzes, coverage type changes, front floor alignments, etc.
It's hard to know exactly what he's referring to, but in my opinion, something that I noted, and I talked about it on my thread, that you saw repeatedly that Zim hasn't really done a ton of, is he was doing a lot of slants, a lot of stunting the front four up front. He was trying to really, I think, make up for the lack of talent that he had up front by using movement, by using these type of things to try to mess up blocking combinations. But they just didn't work out for the Cowboys. They were getting caught in the wrong stunts. They would do a TE stunt and it would vacate the gap, unfortunately, leave them unable to, set an edge on that side, or maybe they were doing a twist up in the middle and they kind of got bungled up. I know Baldy did a vid showing how undisciplined the Cowboys have been when they're running their twists and their stunts, how they're not coming off. The looper is coming off way too wide, not coming off tight off the hip like you're supposed to, like they did with the Dan Quinn. So, and then a lot of that comes from you're doing it with subpar talent. I mean, KJ Henry was on a practice squad for a reason. Tyus Wheat, was kept on here for his special teams ability, not for his defensive ability, and all these other issues. I think him panicking was resorting to these other little schematic switches that defensive coordinators try to do when they don't have the talent to, just line up and do the things that they do consistently. So I think that's more of what he was referring to. as he was panicking a little bit, and it was just a snowball rolling downhill. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger as the game wore along. I don't think the other team I'm not sure they ever punted. I'm not
They
sure
did.
the Lions
No.
ever punted.
The
Right?
Lions, their social team made a highlight video of their punter, and it was all holding on field goals and extra points.
That's the life right there. That's
Yeah,
the life.
Exactly. I think it's one of those things that on the defensive side of the ball, like I said, I'm not casting any judgment because what you said with Zim is exactly right. Like all the twists, all the stunts, all the slants, that is just him trying to take a defensive line that is massively overmatched from a talent standpoint against
against that offensive line.
Against the Detroit offensive
line in football.
Yeah, and try something to give those guys an advantage. Try to get those guys on the move. Try to do things. Did it work? No, clearly. But he's just trying stuff at this point, man. Like he's just trying to get something to work, trying to get some sort of a negative play so that because if you get a negative play on Detroit, okay, now you can put them in a real pass situation and you can blitz. Like we saw them generate some pressure when they were able to, get into the Invader Zim third down packages. Even with the crazy downgraded talent, they were able to get some pressure in those packages. But you have to be able to generate a negative play to do that, and they are not going to. They weren't able to do that simply. So let me ask you this question, and this isn't a question we got from Twitter, or in the comments yet, but we've got about 10 minutes left with you here, so I want to get your thoughts on this. It feels to me like it's time to kind of reboot this coaching thing. Mm-hmm. On both sides of the ball. I know the players love Al Harris, and maybe the Joneses love to keep one or two of their guys and try to have some sort of continuity. Maybe making him the defensive coordinator is the answer. But the problem is if you make a first-time defensive coordinator the answer, I guarantee you're going to wind up with, Marvin Lewis as the head coach or something like that.
Especially when the defensive coordinator or the guy who would be the defensive coordinator, one of his famous quotes last year is, "I don't really do much scheme."
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of that in Dan Quinn is you're playing cover one all the time. Like there's not a whole lot of scheme for you to coach when you're playing nothing but man all day. Mm-hmm. But it just seems like it's time to just reset the whole thing from a coaching staff standpoint. I'll say it this way. It feels like the only part of this team that's coached with very much detail at all is special teams. Like they are one of the few teams in the league that's like really trying to take advantage of this, of the dynamic kickoff stuff, of trying to put the ball in different places with the kicker and the fun. I mean, they ran a fake reverse return. Kavonte Turpin returns it from 9 yards deep and still fakes the reverse and winds up with a big lane to run through and, gets him in scoring position right before the half. Like if I'm holding on to anybody on this staff, it's Bones Fossil. Mm-hmm. And everybody else can go and you can refresh it. What's your thought? And if you could pick a guy, whether it's realistic or not in terms of who the Joneses would actually hire, who would you pick?
I definitely think it's time. I thought it was time after last year's debacle against the 49ers that it was time to kind of put a blank canvas, really start anew. I totally come from the same, ballpark that you do of when you're hiring a new coach, you want to hire an offensive-minded head coach, because they're the most likely one to get poached from another team if you're doing well. So, the types like the Ben Johnsons of the world. Obviously, everybody thinks that Ben Johnson would be, the best potential hire, I think, among the available offensive coordinators. I also like my boy with the Texans, former PFF.
Bobby Slowick.
Yeah, Slowick. Yeah, couldn't think of his last name. I was thinking Bobby. But yeah, Bobby Slowick would be great. But I honestly do think that totally revamping the offensive system is totally necessary. I think you have to restart it from the bare bones. A big thing of mine is making motion at the snap an integral part of your entire offense, not making it something that you add on, make it something that is utilized throughout, things like the 49ers done, the Dolphins do, the Packers do. these type of offenses that have proven, well, not the Dolphins, but that have proven to be capable to put together a good offense, even when they're not totally healthy and they don't have all their stars. I think those.
Well, I think the Dolphins have done it when their offensive line is healthy. They've been able to handle like a receiver injury or a running back injury or something like that. They're just not super deep on the offensive line, and they're very fragile in that group. And so it all kind of comes apart when you can't run the ball or pass protect for that group. Yeah.
And then on the defensive side of the ball, I like the schematic direction they're going with Zimmer and everything. I just think you need someone who's a little bit younger and better equipped to coach and get the most out of today's athlete. I think Zimmer's a little bit old in that fast. He doesn't really relate to today's athlete. I don't think that's really reared its ugly head with the Cowboys yet, but I think it's something that the Cowboys would be better get younger on the defensive coordinator side. I definitely wouldn't be surprised if the Joneses, make it a stipulation to keep an Al Harris or, keep a Lunda Wells on coaching staff. I mean, we saw how much our boy with the defensive line, geez, my mind is bad with names right now, but who was the defensive line coach that was always with the Cowboys until this last year?
It was Leon Lett.
Yeah, Leon Lett. I mean, he was here with how many different coaching staffs?
Like 4 or 5 different defensive coordinators.
Yeah. So I don't put it past Jerry and them to do that. So I think he would do that. Honestly, this is going to be laughed at because he wouldn't take a defensive coordinator job. But I honestly think the person who would best get the most out of the Cowboys' defensive personnel is Bill Belichick. I think he's proven to be a kind of a schematic wizard on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think he's a good, like, with the people part. I don't think he's all the thing. He's really good at the defensive side of the ball, and I'm not sure he's really good at any of the other parts of being the head coach, which is like picking an offensive staff. I don't want Matt Patricia designing
or
this.
Josh McDaniel running.
Yeah. I don't need James McDaniels or whatever coming back to coach the offense. I don't need him picking. Definitely don't need him picking in the draft. Kick him out of the draft room.
Yeah.
The Patriots had some of the worst draft classes in the entire NFL, and were kind of held up by the fact that they had a guy named Tom Brady at quarterback who was able to soften all those blows. But if you can get someone like, someone maybe from that, or Mike McDonald's coaching trees already, the Jim Harbaugh kind of defensive coaching tree with Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter has proven to be very, very, very fruitful. I mean, the Chargers are playing the best defense they've played over there in
a long time.
Yeah, almost a decade, it feels like. So getting someone like that, would be very intriguing. I'm not as in tune with kind of like the defensive coaches coming up, besides like the defensive line coaches, like a Chris Kurasek with the 49ers would be fun. But a lot of times defensive line coaches don't turn out to be those defensive coordinators just because they don't have like the back end, the coverage part. But those are the type of things I would be looking for. Definitely someone like Ben Johnson would be top of the mind for me, a Bobby Slowick, something like that. I know the Cowboys won't, but I would be very into, even diving into the college coaching ranks to look maybe like if you want to get crazy, someone like a Dan Lanning from Oregon would be fantastic. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting. Unfortunately, it's probably going to go retread route like it has been the last few years. Not sure who would even be the best retread to go after at this point. Can you bring Bill Parcells back? That would be fun.
The version of that would be Belichick would be who that would be.
Mm-hmm.
But
and we know the litany of issues that can create.
Absolutely.
If you can hire Bill Belichick to be the head coach, but tell them you don't get to hire the offensive staff and you don't get the draft, that would be fun.
Yeah, the problem is that who's responsible for hiring the offensive staff then? You're going to want the Joneses hiring, whoever.
You play.
I'll tell you mine. So, the guy, right, is Ben Johnson, right? That's the head coach guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when you think defensive, like, I would throw a Brinks truck at Robert Saleh.
Didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Because head coach, for me, if I'm going to hire a young offensive-minded head coach, there are like 50 former defensive-minded head coaches that exist on the market every year available as defensive coordinators that have proven capable of like, okay, head coach, you don't have to worry about defense. It's the Dan Quinn route, right? Just left, got fired middle of the season from a job where he was the defensive-minded head coach. Now, luckily, the Jets' defense has actually been good, where the Falcons weren't, but defensive-minded head coach gets fired, probably is going to wind up taking a coordinator position to get back in the league. The most likely scenario. Go throw a Brinks truck at Robert Saleh, and if you wind up with Ben Johnson and Robert Saleh, I guarantee you all that detail stuff you're talking about, all of that schematic worry stuff that you're talking about, all of that not aligning the defense with the right kind of athlete, not being able to relate to the modern athlete stuff, all of that stuff goes so far out the window, it's not even funny.
Mm-hmm.
Another guy that I didn't think he would ever come to the league, but came to the league last year or this year, I would throw so much money at Jim Leonard to be my defensive coordinator.
Oh, that's a good one. So that might be my favorite.
People who are not familiar, Jim Leonard was for a bunch of years the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin, like all the way back through the TJ Watt years, all these guys who come into the league from Wisconsin to play defense. We're going to go for a walk with John. Jim Leonard was their defensive coordinator. They made some coaching staff turnover over the course of the last couple of years, and he's with the Broncos this year as their defensive pass game coordinator and defensive backs coach. If it's not going to be like an old crotchety guy who used to be a head coach, if you're going to give me an old head coach, give me Jim Leonard on defense, because it makes me feel like I at least have a chance to have a schematic advantage on defense, even if I'm probably not going to have it on offense because you're going to hire an old guy and that kind of thing. That would be my ideal pairing, would be like a Ben Johnson. Bobby Slowick, I think, would be cool. And then I would hope you could bring Gerard Johnson with him. I don't know that you'd be able to get Gerard Johnson out of Houston. He's from Houston. Yeah. He's the quarterback's coach there. Probably will wind up being the next offensive coordinator there if he doesn't leave wherever Bobby Slowick goes. But if you could bring Bobby Slowick and Gerard Johnson and then go get either Robert Saleh or Jim Leonard to coach your defense, like, I'm all in. I'm back in. Let's go roll it back in 2025. This team is really good at drafting. Let's go.
Another before I go, I think one positional coach that's been overlooked for the Cowboys in recent, but they need to get it next coaching staff. That should be the number one hire, offensive line coach.
Yes.
We saw, the best hire that Bill Belichick ever made was Dante Scarnecchia.
Yep, absolutely.
We saw what he did with those offensive lines consistently in New England, and I think, getting a guy like Mike Munchak, who has proven to be a fantastic offensive line coach in the NFL for years, different teams, different personnel, but he consistently gets them to play to the best of their capabilities, and he doesn't have a job right now.
Yep.
So
it's insane to me with how bad offensive line play is in the league.
From what I hear, it's himself. He only wants to coach for certain head coaches. He's not someone who's gonna, just go with willy-nilly with whoever tries to offer him a gig. So if maybe they hire someone who has a connection to him of some sort, and they can convince him to come and coach the offensive line, it would be fantastic. But I think offensive line coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, those three I think are the most important kind of coaching hires that a new head coach will have to make.
I wonder if Hank Fraley, the Lions offensive line coach, would come with Ben Johnson.
Never know. I always wonder.
He's been there a bunch of years.
Because there are environments where, when an offensive coordinator leaves, he doesn't want to take anyone because he doesn't want to disrespect the head coach. Like, I don't want to take your people. But then there are other people that leave and like, I'm taking as many goddamn people as I can.
I want my guys who know how to teach my stuff. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where you've seen like Belichick in the past has gotten into some, kerfuffles with his previous coordinators because they kind of took some of his people. I would be very interested to see, if a Ben Johnson or a Bobby Slowick or whoever, if they were hired, if they would try to, snag some of their compadres with them, or if they would try to just develop a whole new coaching staff.
Yeah, the thing about Slowick, and we'll let you go here real quick. The thing about Slowick is that he comes from a tree where he could go he could not pull anybody from Houston, but he could go grab the quarterback's coach from San Francisco and make him the offensive coordinator, and the assistant offensive line coach in LA and make him the offensive line. Like, he could pull from 5 or 6 different teams around the league and pull a staff together, and they would all speak the same language immediately and all be teaching the same stuff. So, guys, thanks so much for joining us. A quick little episode. John's got to run for work stuff, life. We will take care. We will see you guys on Tuesday as we get ready for the 49ers coming out of the bye week. Take care, guys. We will see you Tuesday.